Hi, Kevin Williams here again. I want to start off by talking a little bit about the e-course and why I actually run the training course out on the road. What's the reason for doing that? Well, the important thing about running any training intervention is that it has to have a purpose, and the purpose has to be one that is valid. Now, the way I see it, there are two ways to approach motorcycle training. There's the traditional method, which is to encourage people to up their skill level, with the theory behind it that if we have an improved level of skill, we won't crash so much. Whether that works or not is a very good question. Increasingly, there is more and more evidence that if it does work, the results are fairly short-lived. And in the worst cases, it may not do anything positive. It may actually have some negative effects because upskilling people tends to make people more confident in their skills. So my alternative approach here is to help people understand why their skills may be deficient in certain circumstances. Now, let's be realistic about this. Every time we go out on the road on a bike, we don't crash. Although sometimes the statistics that we're fed back from road safety makes it seem that motorcycling is a very dangerous activity. If you actually do the sums from a sort of a perspective of how many riders there are and how many miles they cover every year, and then you look at the number of serious crashes there are, the vast majority of motorcyclists will never crash in a year. Most of us will never have a serious crash in our lifetime. So, the odds are not stacked against us from the beginning, but we can always make the odds work in our favour by upskilling, but more importantly, making our knowledge of how to use those skills, how to apply them, better. And to achieve that, we really need an understanding of how skills break down. So to that end, I set up this survival skills course called the Performance Bends course, all the way back in, I think it was 2002. So it's been running 18 years and it's changed over the years. Obviously, new content has come in. Some of the content has maybe slipped out or been compressed a bit. But the upshot, the guiding principle behind all the courses that I've ever run is from my dispatch riding days, when I learnt very, very quickly that crashing was a very bad idea, not only because it hurt physically, but also because it hit me in the wallet. And frankly, when your wallet is taking a beating, that is a really quick learning curve. Quicker probably than actually falling off and hurting yourself. Most people tend to think, well, it won't happen to me again. But when you are short of money because you aren't off the bike, that's a really, really good motive for carrying on learning what you're doing and doing it better. Right, okay, so the problem is that over the years, motorcycle crashes have actually fallen in terms of numbers, but also crashes per distance travelled. If you look at the graph from the 1980s, when motorcycling hit a bit of a peak, to the current date of 2020, you'll find that the numbers have fallen up to about 2012, 2013, when they flattened off and may even be taking a little bit of a rise. We don't really know why that is, but it's something to keep an eye on. But when we actually drill down a little bit further into those statistics, what we find is that a certain style of crashing, as it were, comes out over and over in the stats. Junction collisions, I'm sure you know about those, and that's the focus for my Science of Being Seen presentation, to try to help riders understand why those happen and to be more effective in their strategies for avoiding it. Overtaking is another serious issue for riders, where if it goes wrong, it tends to go wrong very badly indeed. And the other place that we tend to crash is on corners, to the point where, in fact, the majority of fatalities on motorcycles are actually caused by open road crashes, and most of those are in fact on corners, and usually they are single vehicle. The motorcycle crashes on its own. if there are two vehicles involved, it's almost always the motorcycle that has run wide in the corner and hit something coming the other way, not the other way around, as riders like to think. So we do have some stats on this, and we'll be looking at them later on in the course. But fundamentally, those are the problems, and those are what I'm trying to solve with this course. Why do we crash? Well, again, we'll come on to this in a little bit more detail over the weeks, but I want you to just point you at the no surprise, no accident scheme that I've been involved in for the last few years. And the factors that are identified as being contributing to crashes, Keith Code came across these or worked these out a long time ago, and again we'll talk about this in more detail. But when people are confronted with a sudden threat to their health, they tend to react in a way that they didn't plan. So all those lovely emergency stops we do on learning to ride often go straight out the window in a genuine emergency when we need to brake hard. Similarly, we get to a bend that we may well have ridden around a dozen times before, hundreds of times, even sometimes thousands of times, and something about it is different today. And we get it wrong. We don't actually manage to negotiate it in a way that we've been capable of doing on many times before. It's not always unfamiliar bends that riders crash on. So what Keith Code came up with is what he called survival reactions. Again, we'll talk about this, but the classic ones are panicking, which might be a big grab of the front brake. It might be freezing and doing nothing, which is another factor. People actually simply forget to steer when they get into trouble in a corner. And they can also target fixate, so they actually look in the wrong place. Once we're target fixated, it's remarkably difficult to get out of trouble. So those are the survival reactions. And what's the trigger for those? That was the bit that Keith Code didn't investigate. But the No Surprise, No Accident campaign is based on research that suggests that the trigger for most unwanted reactions is surprise. It's simply failing to predict what was about to happen. You may have heard people say in the past you need to look 3 seconds into the future. That line was used years ago. First time I heard it was a guy called Royce Creasy, who used to write in Bike magazine back in the probably the late 70s. So the basic underpinning ideas that I'll be exploring have been around for a while. I have got some unique content which I will share with you as we go into the course, but I just wanted to give you this quick overview of why we're running the course and the structure it's going to take, the thrust we're going to follow. And it's going to be to try to understand crashes, to try to work out why people fall off in corners, and then to have strategies ready to recognize things are going wrong whenever we can, and to have strategies to get out of trouble when we're already in it. So rather than arrive in a corner and suddenly find ourselves in a big mess and struggle to get out, we'll either be better prepared to avoid it or better prepared to get out of trouble. Okay, so carry on reading further down the page, and we'll be back with another video fairly shortly.